You live in an age that promises freedom. You can say what you want, go where you please, and think whatever you desire. You're told that you're in control, that technology empowers you, that democracy gives you a voice. Yet if you look closer, you might feel a quiet unease, a sense that someone, somewhere, is watching. Every click, every search, every opinion, every hesitation, recorded, analyzed, and used to predict your next move. You feel free, but you're being guided. You feel independent, but you're being shaped. Michel Foucault warned of this world long before it arrived. He called it the age of control, a world where power no longer wears chains or crowns, but hides in systems, institutions, and even inside your mind. Foucault wasn't interested in power as something possessed by kings or governments. He wanted to understand how power operates in everyday life, how it seeps into schools, hospitals, prisons, and even language itself. For him, power wasn't a thing you hold. It was a relationship, a web, an invisible current that moves between people and structures, shaping behavior without open violence. And that's what makes it dangerous, because when control becomes invisible, resistance becomes impossible. He looked back at history and saw something changing. In the Middle Ages, power was public and brutal. A king ruled through fear, soldiers enforced his will, and punishment was a spectacle, a man whipped in the square, a traitor beheaded before the crowd. Power showed itself in blood and chains. But over time, society shifted. The gallows were replaced by prisons, the whip by surveillance, and fear by discipline. People began to control themselves. Society didn't need public torture anymore, it had created systems that made obedience normal. This, Foucault said, was the birth of the disciplinary age. In his famous work Discipline and Punish, Foucault described a model of control called the Panopticon. It was an idea first imagined by the philosopher Jeremy Bentham, a circular prison with a watchtower in the middle. The prisoners couldn't tell when they were being watched, but they knew they could be at any moment. So they behaved as if they always were. This was genius and terrifying. The Panopticon didn't need guards to shout or punish. The prisoner policed himself. Foucault saw in this design the blueprint for modern power, surveillance that works not through violence, but through visibility. Now think about your world. You carry the Panopticon in your pocket. Your phone tracks your location, your apps monitor your habits, your social media rewards you for conformity. You're constantly seen, but you can't see who's watching. Companies and governments collect mountains of data, forming invisible maps of your desires, fears, and weaknesses. The Panopticon has evolved. It's no longer a tower in a prison, it's an algorithm, a camera, a network. You become the prisoner and the guard at once. You shape your image for others, you censor yourself online, you post what earns approval, and you hide what might offend. You are disciplined, not by chains, but by likes and metrics. Foucault's warning wasn't about technology itself, but about the logic behind it, the way power hides in systems that claim to protect or improve you. Schools, he said, were built not just to educate, but to train minds to obey schedules, routines, and hierarchies. Hospitals didn't only heal, they classified and normalized behavior. Prisons didn't simply punish, they produced the idea of the criminal itself. Everywhere he looked, he saw the same pattern, institutions that defined what was normal, healthy, legal, or sane, and through those definitions, controlled people. When you think of control, you might imagine tyranny or censorship. But Foucault's insight was darker. He showed that the most effective power doesn't forbid, it shapes. It doesn't need to shout, it whispers. It doesn't force you to obey, it teaches you to want to. You don't resist it because you think it's you. You internalize the rules. You judge yourself by the standards of the system that controls you. You wake up on time, you follow the plan, you chase productivity, you self-optimize, you measure your worth through performance. And all the while, you feel responsible, not realizing the system was built to make you feel that way. This is the paradox of modern freedom. You're told you can be anything, but you must fit into categories that define what anything means. You can express yourself, but only in ways the system rewards. You can pursue happiness, but only through consumption. Power today doesn't say no, it says yes, on my terms. And those terms are hidden in the very language you use, the platforms you depend on, the institutions you trust. Foucault didn't offer easy solutions because he didn't believe in a world free of power. For him, power is everywhere because relationships are everywhere. What matters is whether we see it, whether we recognize how it moves and shapes us. Awareness is the beginning of freedom. If you can see how you're being controlled, you can begin to step outside the illusion. But the problem is, control today doesn't look like control. It looks like convenience. When your phone unlocks with your face, you call it innovation. When your feed shows what you like, you call it personalization. When your boss tracks your productivity, you call it efficiency. Each of these comforts hides a cost. The more data you give away, the more predictable you become. And the more predictable you are, the easier you are to manage. You don't even need force, you just need information. Foucault foresaw this transformation, the shift from punishing the body to controlling the soul. He called it biopower, the management of life itself. Governments and corporations no longer needed to suppress people through violence, they could guide populations by regulating birth, health, sexuality, and behavior. Power had become biological, it shaped the very way people lived, loved, and reproduced. It was no longer about killing the body, it was about cultivating a compliant life. And now, biopower has gone digital. Algorithms predict your emotions before you feel them. Health apps tell you what to eat, when to move, and how to sleep. News feeds decide what you believe. We've outsourced the management of our own minds. The question Foucault would ask today isn't who controls you, but how have you learned to control yourself? Because the system doesn't need to force you, it teaches you to do it voluntarily. This is what he meant when he said that power produces subjects. It doesn't just dominate individuals, it creates them. The modern individual isn't born free and then oppressed, he's constructed by systems that define his identity. You're shaped by categories like citizen, consumer, patient, student. These identities come with rules, and those rules are enforced not by violence but by norms. Once you internalize them, you don't need authority to watch you, you watch yourself. Imagine how deeply this runs. A student learns to sit still, follow schedules, and measure worth through grades. A worker learns to track performance, meet deadlines, and compare output. A citizen learns to obey laws, respect systems, and fear disorder. Every step of life reinforces obedience disguised as order. You're conditioned to believe that success means compliance. Foucault saw the 18th and 19th centuries as the birth of this machine, a society that trained bodies and minds through subtle discipline. The industrial age perfected it. The digital age amplified it. Today, the machine doesn't just train bodies, it trains attention. Your mind is the new battlefield. Power no longer locks you in prisons, it floods your feed, designs your desires, and curates your world. And the worst part? You like it. You participate in it. You build your own cage. When Foucault spoke of power and knowledge, he meant that every system of knowledge, every science, every institution, every claim to truth is also a claim to power. The way we talk about mental health, intelligence, success, or deviance isn't neutral, it's political. The moment someone defines what is a normal, they gain the authority to exclude whatever doesn't fit. So knowledge becomes a tool of governance. Think about it, who decides what is true online today? Algorithms, experts, or collective outrage? Whoever controls the narrative, controls the population. In the age of control, truth itself becomes strategic. It's not about facts, it's about persuasion. Power no longer needs censorship, it simply drowns truth in noise. And the more chaotic the information, the easier it is to guide the crowd. You stop asking what's true and start asking what feels right. You become a product of influence rather than understanding. Foucault's warning wasn't a prophecy of doom, it was a mirror. He wanted us to see how deeply power penetrates us, not so we could destroy it, but so we could question it. The moment you believe you are free from control, that's when control has you completely. The only way to stay awake in a system built on discipline is to cultivate awareness, to question every label, every rule, every invisible norm that tells you who to be. He once said, "Where there is power, there is resistance." And that's the hope. Even in the most controlled environments, people find cracks. They resist in small ways, in language, in creativity, in thought. Every act of genuine self-understanding is rebellion. Every time you refuse to be defined by what society demands, you take back a piece of your power. The system thrives on your unconsciousness. Awareness breaks its spell. Today, we live in what many call the surveillance capitalism era, a world where attention is the currency and your behavior is the product. Foucault would not be surprised. He would ask, if you are the product, who profits from your obedience? Who benefits from your endless scrolling, your divided attention, your silent consent? Control no longer needs kings, it needs users. It doesn't need force, it needs engagement. But here's the tragedy, most people don't even want to be free anymore. They want comfort. They trade autonomy for convenience, privacy for connection, individuality for validation. They think they're expressing themselves, but they're performing. They think they're choosing, but they're following invisible cues. They think they're free, but they're predictable, and predictability is the death of freedom. Foucault would challenge you to reclaim uncertainty, to live in a way that escapes easy definitions. To think differently, not because it's rebellious, but because it's real. Freedom, in his view, isn't about doing whatever you want, it's about becoming aware of the forces that make you want what you want. It's about unmasking the systems that shape your desires and seeing how deeply control hides behind comfort. Ask yourself, when you post, who are you trying to please? When you buy, who are you obeying? When you speak, whose language are you using? The modern individual lives in an invisible web, but the first step to freedom is to see the threads. Power wants you numb. Awareness makes you dangerous. Foucault's life itself was an act of defiance. He questioned everything, madness, medicine, punishment, sexuality, not to destroy society, but to reveal its hidden logic. He believed that history wasn't progress, it was a rotation of control. The forms change, the prisons become schools, the chains become screens, but the function remains the same. Society needs order, and order always comes at the cost of autonomy. Yet he also believed in the possibility of transformation. If power is everywhere, so is resistance. Each moment of consciousness, each act of truth-telling, each refusal to be categorized weakens the invisible net. You can't destroy power, but you can refuse to be mastered by it. You can move within it, bend its logic, and create spaces where real thought still breathes. In the end, the age of control isn't a future to fear, it's a present to understand. You can't escape surveillance, but you can outgrow dependency. You can't stop systems from classifying you, but you can stop believing that those classifications define you. The true rebellion isn't to fight the machine, it's to see it clearly and remain human in spite of it. So the next time you scroll, pause. The next time you're being watched, remember that awareness is your armor. The next time you're told what to believe, question the source. Because Foucault's greatest lesson wasn't that power is evil, it's that power is everywhere. And the more you see it, the less it owns you. This is the age of control, but it doesn't have to be the age of submission. Look closely. The walls aren't made of stone, they're made of ideas. Break those, and no one can cage you again.